Now, I want to invite my good friend Peter Cashien onto the stage to talk a little bit about how the hell we take this forward. Peter is the CIO and global head of climate finance for the Financial Institutions Group of the IFC. He has been, and the IFC has been a driver of green finance for many years. In 2013, the IFC issued two $1 billion benchmark green bonds specifically to excite the market. It's because they issued those bonds that the private sector woke up and realized there was an opportunity. They were 2.5 times oversubscribed in 1.5 hours. Later that year, the private sector market grew, and look where we are today, trillions of dollars of these green bonds. The IFC has been an incredibly important trigger organization for the development of sustainable finance globally. Peter, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Sean. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Sean is the most inspiring, enlightening, and insightful climate speaker there is out there, I think. Would you all agree with me?
Thank you, but as you know, speaking's not the game, it's doing deals, right? So for all of you out there, the job is now to do green deals and make sure the capital flows. This is all about making sure capital flows. So how do we get capital flowing at the scale we need from your perspective, Peter?
Right, so this is our main role, our main job is how do we achieve scale in climate finance? And you know, I take some great comfort in the rate of growth that we're seeing today. So in 2016, 5% of our business and financial institutions group was climate related. Our last quarter, it was 40%. So there has been enormous growth from several hundred million now to over $2.5 billion this year. So the growth potential is there. We've also done market assessments, and you hinted at this in your talk about the enormous opportunity. So over the next decade, we anticipate, we see over 20 trillion of investment opportunity in emerging markets.
Sorry.
With a T.
Did he say 20 trillion? Okay, what's
Yes.
the Latin American share? Quickly, we want the money.
It's approximately a third of that amount.
Whoa, okay.
So it's a large number. Listen, is it all investable today? No. But over the next decade, it is there. And by demonstrating, or given our experience in our own portfolio, that growth potential is enormous. And the financial sector, of course, has an incredibly important role to play in financing the transition. And one thing I want to highlight and point out is the importance and the role of institutional investors and the banking system. Because development finance institutions, we may think we're great, Carlos Serrano is great, all the team is great, but we're not actually that important in the bigger picture. What we are good at is helping create the market, working with regulators, taxonomies, building the foundations and doing those first deals. But then what we need to do is mobilize institutional investors and the broader commercial banking sector to come in and finance it. If we look at all the funds available from DFIs and we compare that to institutional investors, it's 100 times. So for every dollar DFIs have, institutional investors globally have 100. So really what's most important is not what we do with our $1, but how do we bring some of that $100 into our own markets, into emerging markets to finance the transition.
Sounds great. So I want to know how quick. I mean, we've got people like Zurich Insurance speaking tomorrow, or Group Asura here being very positive about this, but what does it mean in practice? What are the practical steps to get this capital flowing in the right direction?
Right, yes, so some building blocks to start. So of course, the first is on the capital market side, having a taxonomy, having the regulator on board.
Clarity of guidance we talked about.
Correct. Right? Second is making financial institutions aware of the investment opportunity. And we help do that in other DFIs through our advisory services programs. So for example, green building is an enormous area of growth. But unless a bank, an FI, understands that investment opportunity, they won't be able to convince their credit committees that we should go in a big way into this new segment, or electric vehicles, or climate smart agri. So it's also educating investors on that investment opportunity. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this as financial institutions to invest and make money. So climate presents a great investment opportunity, one where you can gain market share ahead of your competitors. And we always promote that. We're very much private sector, fully commercial. So we want to help you become more profitable. And in the process, it's actually going to be very beneficial for climate and the environment. And that's what we want to achieve as our development impact. Additionally, we want the institutions to be aware of the climate risk that's in their portfolio today and that will come about in the future, because that again ties directly into the profitability of an institution.
So the taxonomy story, it's got a clear guidance, is developing, right? Colombia's published it, of course, Chile's planning it, Mexico has programmed it, but I believe there's 14 countries, have I got that right, Fish? 14 countries in Latin America working on taxonomies at the moment. That's an extraordinary change, and there's a coordination aspect of this. So the idea is not that the Colombian taxonomy is different to the Chilean taxonomy and whatever, but with collaboration and coordination, we can ensure support by local regulators, but broad harmonization to ensure capital flows in the region. That's good. But the next step, of course, is the work of the capacity within the banks. And you have a 30-30 program, right? Can you explain what that is and how you are going to help banks figure out how to operationalize this?
Right, because that's what it's all about, is translating this opportunity into concrete deals and investment opportunities. So about 2 years ago, we started working with the German government to fund a really ambitious new program called 30 by 30. And what that entails is working with banks so that they can increase the exposure on their balance sheet up to 30% by 2030 and have zero exposure to coal. So we, with $20 million from GIZ, the German government, we selected 4 countries globally. We work in 150 countries. We picked only 4, and interestingly enough, Mexico is one of those 4 and the only one in Latin America. So it just demonstrates to us the promise, potential, and interest of climate finance and sustainability in a country like Mexico. And basically, we have 4 components, and it ranges from working with the regulator to implement ESG and sustainability throughout their work, and then working with their governed institutions. It works with banks to help green their balance sheet and identify new opportunities. Institutional investors to give them the capacity to evaluate green bonds, sustainability-linked bonds, and see that investment opportunity. So really grow holistically the infrastructure, the financial sectors to support climate finance. And we're, a year and a half in. We're really having great progress so far. We're working with the World Bank on the regulatory side, and we're only, it's a 7-year program, so we still have a lot of runway to work with.
Do you see examples?
In Mexico, we don't have concrete deals that have come out of it yet. Although Latin America is our most productive, in a way, region globally. Last year, we did $800 million in climate finance in the financial sector in Latin America. So that was 50% of all of our business last year in Latin America was climate related. And that's far greater than other regions. So it just demonstrates.
So let me get this right. LATAM is leading.
Yes.
Yes!
which is usually the case. In fact, whenever we have a pilot, we want to try something new, we want to innovate, we look around the world, we're like, let's go to Latin America.
Hey, you heard that here first. Any journalists in the room, quickly write that up.
Unfortunately, we need to do some work on our Spanish, though, given how important Latin America is in this whole construct.
Next year, no white Anglo men on the stage, please, folks. This will change. But in the meantime, we're here, of course, bring you the global story as part of this. Can you tell us a little bit about what this means, about some deals that have been done, give people a flavor of what it means in practice?
Yeah, let's share a few kind of really great stories. So as I mentioned, we're really not just about doing a deal, we're about creating a new market and putting everything in place so that it can grow independently of us in the future. So I'd like to profile a couple of areas. The first is in Ecuador. We developed last year a new product called the Blue Economy and Blue Bonds. So basically, this involves financing the clean water and reduced pollution in water, sustainable fisheries, so anything related to promoting water as a valuable resource and doing it in a very sustainable way. We worked with two banks in Ecuador, Banco Internacional and most recently ProduBanco, and worked with BI on their first bond, a blue bond, $80 million, and just last week, a $20 million loan with ProduBanco to support the blue economy. Going back 1 year ago, we worked with ICMA, International Capital Markets Association, to create a blue bond guidelines and framework. And since then, we've done $1 billion of blue investments globally. So this is really what we want to do: innovate, create a new product, work with regulators to come up with a guidelines or taxonomy, and then give the banks the skills and the capacity to target this new area that's very impactful. Another quick story I'll share is in Colombia, related to the green building work. So this is any new construction or retrofit renovation that results in increased energy efficiency and use of green products. So in that case, we worked with 3 banks, Itaú, Bancolombia, and Davivienda. We provided advisory services to give them that capacity, show them that investment opportunity, and now have provided over $250 million in funding to these banks to create essentially a green building industry. And now over 20% of the new construction in Colombia is certified through an IFC-led green certification program.
EDGE.
EDGE, yes.
Which means they qualify for ClimateBond certification, everyone. Make sure we follow that one up. 20%.
Yeah. Yep, that's a pretty impressive stat. And this is only over about a 2.5-year period.
So Carlos, why isn't this happening everywhere in Latin America? What's going on? You're being slow. We need to push the IFC, everyone, by the way. But nevertheless, that's a great story.
No, Brazil as well. We did a green bond for green buildings in Peru last year with BBVA, also in Brazil. So it's, and of course, next on our list is Mexico. So we have some ongoing discussions there. Sabadell, which was actually our first green building bond, even before the pandemic, before kind of all the vogue and fashion of green building and green bonds. So that was a nice entry point for Mexico and taking the lead there.
What about development finance institutions? What about the NAFINs, the FIRAs, the Findeters, the Banco de Brazils of the world?
Right, so they have a critical role to play, and you know, they can provide that financing, particularly if there's a subsidy angle. In some cases, what we do need is blended finance, concessional funding. So if they're able to come in and provide a first loss piece, that can enable and facilitate significantly more funding. Some examples that we've looked at is in the distributed energy or rooftop solar area. These are sometimes new companies, pay-go, not maybe so creditworthy, but with great potential to grow. So if we can have an entity come in, provide, say, a first loss piece into an SPV or a FIDIC, that would allow then commercial investors to come in a much larger scale, they would have a really important role to play.
In fact, I'm going to go further and say, I don't think we can make this transition unless we transform our national development banks, can we? And we need them to be mobilizing a lot more capital.
Yes, I think that's true. And I mean, it's a great point, because actually development finance institutions, the global ones, the large regional ones, should actually work much more closely with the domestic national level ones. And frankly, we do a bit, but not enough. And you know, they're at this nexus between public policy, relationship with the regulator, and having large financing. So they're a natural counterpart for us to really grow it beyond that initial. We're happy to take the role to create do the first blue bond, the first green bond, but to really scale it and grow it and tap into the domestic institutional investor base, they have a central role to play. So I think, that can be one of our more follow-up items post-conference.
One of the challenges of the change we have to see on the planet is a lot of it's new. The network for greening the financial system, the Association of 100 Central Banks, is very clear when it says the past can no longer be a guide for the future because of the dramatic changes we need to make. So we need to be looking at how we manage a whole lot of new scenarios. When it comes down to risk management, which is the essence, of course, the industry we're in, we now need to look at fresh ways of managing risk. And the difficulty is for private sector actors, the models they currently have don't help them invest in new very easily. But of course, that's always been the case. We didn't build bridges across rivers by leaving it to the private sector to do it. We made sure it was attractive for the private sector. We either issued sovereign bonds or national bonds, or in the US, we often provide guarantees of revenue to show that so the private sector build it. Risk mitigation, picking up the risk piece, is a critical central component for achieving a transition in the next 20 years, next 30 years. Of the 597 development banks in the world, national or multinational, there are about 7 that do anything to crowd in private finance. 7. That's an extraordinary opportunity for us. If we could get a leverage ratio, what's your leverage ratio at IFC? 5 to 1, 6 to 1?
No, I wish it was that high, actually.
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
You've got to do better.
I can lie, but no, in fact, well, this is the great point. We need to, as development finance institutions, be mobilizing much more than we are. It's over 1, our mobilization ratio, but, frankly, that's not good enough. That won't get us there. And, the requests or the comments you hear from the market, from the U.S. Treasury, is that we need to use development finance institutions to provide blended finance, or at least identify it from donors and then use it to crowd in the private sector. And definitely, I fully agree with that. I mean, we still have to price things as a commercial investor. However, we can take much more risk than, say, an institutional investor. So that's a role we need to play and raise funding from donors to have that subsidy piece.
Partly because you better understand these sectors because you're focusing on them.
Yeah, we work in it day to day. I mean, our job is to do risk-sharing facilities in Mali and to do the first blue bond in Ecuador. And somewhat, it seems fairly routine to us, but it's pretty exotic to, somebody in London or San Francisco.
So one of the things we're talking about at Climate Bonds is the need, of course, to improve the leverage ratio of the international development banks. But we already have a good start with the EBRDs of the world, European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, with the Inter-American Development Bank and IADB Invest, with IFC. We already have a good start. They've got to do better, but we can also at the same time work with our national development banks to do a lot better from a very low base, because they're typically doing direct lending and not doing enough crowding in. And sometimes it's pretty simple, isn't it? I mean, we have investors queuing up now, like Swiss Re was telling me recently, asset management, that they're very happy to invest alongside IADB or IFC if IADB and IFC do the due diligence and manage the progress. They will come in beside. They just need someone to hold their hand. More hand-holding. We could get Banco de Brazil in the agricultural sector in Brazil to do that and bring in private sector investors beside them. No?
Yeah, that's a great point, Sean. And at the IFC, we actually recently launched a co-investment platform, and SAFE, the Chinese Sovereign Wealth Fund, Allianz Global Investors have just joined us with over $1 billion co-investment. And all the portfolio, reference portfolio, is all Paris-aligned. It's a Paris-aligned portfolio.
Hang on. He just told me that a Washington, D.C.-based development bank with the U.S. as a leading shareholder has been successful at bringing in the Chinese National Government Pension Fund and Allianz in Germany into a... It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no,
that's collaboration.
It's totally cool. And yes, we have actually a very long-standing relationship with SAFE. They were one of our first investors in this co-investment platform going back 7 or 8 years. So they've been a great partner, and they too see both the investment opportunity and the importance of Paris alignment and investing in a way that is consistent with the agreement. So yeah, they've been a great partner, and we're doing it, but as you said, we need to do much more of it.
And you'll see a lot of collaboration at a sustainable finance level between China, the US, and Europe that you won't see as people are fighting like cats and dogs about trade in the public sphere. In a webinar I moderated yesterday with Jing Donghua, who is your former treasurer and vice president, who's now the vice chair of the International Sustainable Standards Board. He was explaining how the Chinese regulator is collaborating with the US Securities Commission and the European regulators on new standards for sustainable finance globally. Yes, that's what we want to see.
Well, that's exactly what this climate change fight needs, is absolute collaboration, coordination amongst all the parties. And, you know, US, China being essentially the largest emitters, and Europe probably in 3. We need all those a front seat at the table.
And they need to give cheaper capital for Latin America. We're working on that. That's coming your way.
Sean, one thing I'd like to follow up on, and you mentioned a climate risk.
Yep.
So, you know, that's a critical component that's the flip side of the climate finance, and the opportunity is the risk, both the transition and the physical. You referenced the impact of physical from increased extreme weather events, but really, especially in the financial sector, it's so important that they understand what these risks are, what is already embedded in their balance sheet, and how to price for this going forward. Insurance companies have actually been at the forefront of this, and I think there's a lot of lessons learned we can take from that. At the IFC, we're providing advisory service programs to increase banks' capacity and FIs in general to know and understand these risks and price for them. And this is all part of the Paris Agreement alignment implementation that we're undergoing with actually all the DFIs are basically on that trajectory.
And I think that's probably where the critical theme out of today's conference. We need a deeper appreciation of the real and material risks we face and how to manage them. But also, I'm going to put it, a deeper appreciation of the risk of missing out. Because there are extraordinary opportunities coming through here. And if we're not really working that through our system, making sure our loan officers, our business, our client relationship understand them, we're going to miss out on deal flow. Other people will get the prize. So it's two sides of the risk here. Right?
No, I love the way you frame that. There's clearly a climate risk, but there's a risk of not seizing that opportunity. And that's really on both fronts. IFC and DFIs in general are there to promote and give our clients the tools to do that.
Apologies for the microphone earlier, everyone, but that's a bit better. We need to wrap up. Next steps.
Next steps? Partner more with CBI. And
yes! Isn't he good?
Listen, next steps, I loved your point about the domestic development banks. We need to do more there. We need to mobilize and scale more and use blended finance for that. We need to just continue on this greening the financial sector by working with regulators. Latin America, again, has been a great example with 14 cases of that. And then lastly is giving FIs, financial institutions, the ability to identify opportunities, invest in those, and hey, we're happy to provide funding for that, and also be aware of the risks. And again, we are there to provide advisory. So we're all in this together. We need to scale very quickly. We've had some good successes, but clearly it's not enough, and we need to accelerate.
So we're getting support now, training, technical assistance, advice from IFC, also from IADB, also from CAF, who's here today. The multilateral development banks are moving. Now we need to move deal flows on the ground. We need to address the transition of our institutions to make sure that our clients can take advantage of the transition of our economies and our societies that's coming through. That's the job. But in a way, it's pretty straightforward, right? Because the resources are beginning to be here, and the shopping list for the future, the taxonomies, are now becoming visible to us. It's just a matter of getting on with it. So thank you so much, Peter, for being with us today.
Oh, thank you, Sean.
Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. But I'm going to say thank you, everyone, for the work you're doing and the work I know you're going to do in the next few years to massively grow this market. We have a global ambition of moving from nearly $1 trillion a year of green bond issuance to $5 trillion a year by 2025. That's the scale of the change, the speed, the rapidity we need to get to. I believe we can get to it with all the things we've been talking about today, mobilizing development finance institutions and so on, but it will depend on you. Good luck.
And good luck in the game today.